Hello, my elementary school students. This week we're focusing on value. Value is the lightness or darkness of a color. So this is the lightness and the darkness of black. And it's a grayscale. So if you notice that the theme is a cityscape because these look like buildings through here. 3 sets of buildings, and we're going to make 3 different values. Very black on the bottom, a little bit grayer, and then it gets light gray, and then we have a completely white circle here and a light gray here. So we're going to create this. You're going to need pencils today. You're going to need a sharpener. You're going to need a circle to trace. I like to use a little plate. You could use whatever you have. And you're going to need 2 pieces of white paper and a glue stick. And last but not least, a pair of scissors, okay? Because we are going to be cutting out the circle here. Okay, so let's get started. You're going to take 1 piece of paper to begin, and I want you to fold it in half. So you're going to line up the corners and carefully slide your finger and push it down so you have a nice fold and your paper is folded in half. Okay? Then you're going to take the bottom of your paper and fold it up to that middle fold. And take your finger and slide it down to press down the fold. And open it up. Okay, so that's going to leave us with 1, 2 horizontal folds. Now, we're going to start at the bottom of your paper, and you're going to create what looks like rectangle shapes that can go up to that first fold, but don't go past that first fold. Now notice I'm just going up and down, making these rectangular, squarish. Some might be wide squares, some might be tall, skinny squares, rectangles. I'm just going up and down with my different size rectangles. And I'm staying inside that first fold. So I'm not going past that. Now the next section, we're going to do the same thing. And this time you can make your rectangles a little bit smaller. But it's the same idea. You're just going up and down, making these rectangular shapes, like as if they were buildings. And then on that last line, we're going to do the same thing right above it. And this time, they'll be very small rectangular box building shapes. Okay. Now take your circle, place it in the middle, and slowly trace around it so that way you have probably only half of the circle showing, like that. Okay, now we're going to take the side of the pencil and we're going to do a little shading. Okay, so shading just means that you're evenly going to be filling in with the side of your pencil each section. And as you start on the top, you're not putting a lot of pressure on the pencil because we want a light gray. We're just going in there and filling in with the pencil. You see I'm using the side of my pencil. And I'm just lightly shading in this gray. I'm trying not to be pushing it very hard because I want to keep it a light, even tone, light, even gray. And if you went outside of the lines, just make sure you have a good eraser. Sometimes these erasers get hard, so you don't want to use it if it's bad. It should be kind of soft, and then I went out the lines a little bit, so I'm just going to fix it up a little bit. Okay, you can also take your finger and blend with your finger if you want to make it a little more smooth without those scratches that the pencil might make. So if your pencil lines are showing too much, try to blend them with your finger and make that light, even gray. Now the next set is going to be a shade darker than this gray here. So I'm going to put a little more pressure on my pencil. Meaning I'm pushing a little harder on my pencil this time to get it to a darker gray. I'm going to keep going all the way until I get that gray to go all the way around that first set of buildings on the bottom there. Okay, so now I have two shades of gray, and if you take your finger, you can kind of rub over it to get rid of those pencil lines or pencil strokes. You don't really want to see those, so we want to make it as even as we can. We have two shades of gray. I would say a light gray and a medium gray. So now we're going to stop with the pencil, give your hand a little break, and your finger might look like that. That's okay, keep it. If you really have to wipe it, you could always wipe it a little bit. But your hands are going to get a little bit messy when we do this kind of shading work, okay? So now I want you to very carefully cut out this part. We're going to cut out just this half circle. And just this little bit over here and this little bit over here, we're going to follow the skyline with the scissor. So let me get my scissor. Now here's a good technique here. When I'm cutting, I'm going to turn the paper, not my scissor. So my scissor's not turning. You notice that? The paper hand turns and the scissor hand stays where it is. It doesn't really move. So I'm going around the buildings, and then I'm going to carefully go around the circle. I'm going to turn the paper as I go, because that's the trick to cutting, is that you're turning the paper, not the scissors. If your scissors are moving around like this, you're cutting the wrong way. Don't cut like that. Turn your paper instead. So I'm just going around the buildings that I made and around the sun part, or the moon, whichever you want to think of it as. And what you're going to be left with is something that looks like this. So we have now this part. Now we're going to take your darkest black. Okay, now you could do this with a black marker, or we can do it with this is done with watercolor, black watercolor paint. So you could take a marker if you wanted to and just fill this all in with a black marker. You could take your pencil and you could fill it in a really dark gray if you wanted to as well. But if you want to be fancy, we're going to use a little black paint to do this bottom part. So you could use your regular watercolor set, find your black, fill that with water, fill that little part with water. Because with watercolor paint, you have to use a lot of water to activate the paint. So once we have it activated, it's ready to go. I'm just going to take my black and I'm going to start to fill in that section on the bottom. And I keep dipping the brush in the water and then back in the black almost every time. Oh! I almost had an accident there. Now, if you want to make your buildings a little fancier, they don't have to all be flat on the top. You could add a curve to the top, like that, with a little antenna, just to make it look like a little different. You could make it look like steps. So if you want to add a little more detail to your building, you could add more rectangles or squares or arches and curves to the tops of your buildings. So if you wanted to add even a triangular shape, you could do that. Or you could just leave them as rectangle shapes, that's okay. Okay, so now I have 3 shades of this black here. So you have black, a medium gray, and a light gray. Okay, so set that aside. And now we're going to do the final piece, which is what you need the second piece of paper for, okay? So set this aside, let it dry. If you did the paint part, let it dry, set it aside. Now take your second piece of paper, you have it this way, and we're just going to take the pencil again. You might have to sharpen your pencil. And we're going to just start at the top of your paper, and I want you to shade all the way across the top of your paper a gray color, okay? Nice and even, just across the top of your paper. It can be kind of dark if you want it to be kind of dark. But now we're going to do this. We're going to have it all this even gray, okay? Now we want to get a little bit lighter as we go down. So I'm going to lighten up the pressure. I'm not going to push so hard on my pencil, and I'm just going to do a shade lighter. I'm not pushing as hard as I was, and that's why the shade is a little bit lighter. Okay, and you see how this dark blended right down into that lighter? If you want to take your finger and do that, you can do that. And now the next one, I want it to fade right to the lightest gray possible. So the lightest gray I can make. Try not to get scratchy like I am. We want it to be even and smooth. We're using the side of the pencil, nice and light. Okay. And now just take your finger and just, rub it so it's nice and smooth. Okay, so we see this value scale right here. It's a dark gray, a medium gray to a light gray, and it fades right into the white. So the idea now is that we're going to take this piece and we're going to line it right up to the bottom so that it's even and it looks like one piece. And what we're going to do is glue this. I'm going to glue this on, okay? I'm going to glue this whole thing together. So what you have to do is flip this over, and it might look a little unattractive on the back side, but we're not using that side. So take your glue stick, place your glue all around the edges. You want it all the way around the edge of where this moon or the sun was. Make sure you put enough glue all on the building tops, the silhouette there, all the way around the edge and the bottom. As long as you get the edges really well, it'll glue down. You don't really have to put glue in the middle. Okay, so here was my second piece that we just shaded. I have my glue. I'm going to flip it over. And I'm going to line up the bottom corners. And then if your hands are dirty, you might want to wipe your hands off, so that way when you actually press this down, you're not getting it fingerprints all over the place. Okay, and it should be glued down pretty tightly because you want this to look like it's just one piece of paper, not two pieces of paper. And there you have it. You have your value scale cityscape. I hope you guys can try this out at home and post your results on Google Classroom. See you soon.